And now a little story from the Appleseed.
Well, I was very lucky to grow up in Madison County, North Carolina. That's just north of Asheville. And I'm sure if you're listening at home or here in the studio, you might have been to Asheville. Asheville is a special place to me. Some great music, great food, and of course, places like the Biltmore House. But north of Asheville, in a little small community of Marshall, North Carolina, is where I grew up. Now, I was really lucky to grow up there because these are folks that grew up on creek beds, I guess you could say, and each community had its own kind of particular way of doing things. In fact, my mom and dad's family grew up in two different communities, from the way they made cornbread to the way they strung up beans in the field. Everything was quite different. Even the music was different. Now, I was very fortunate because I got to know 6 of my great-grandparents. Can you imagine that? 6 of my great-grandparents. And one of my favorite things to do would be to go to their house, sit on their front porch, and have them tell me tales of when they were boys and girls. And now these were folks that were born in the late 1800s, like my Paul Baker. Paul Baker told me when he was 5 years old on a dare, he rode across the Pigeon River on a sow hog. And I asked Paul, I said, well, weren't you scared, Paul? He said, well, I wasn't scared not one bit. He said, I'd watch Mommy wash enough dishes to know that grease floats on water. Or somebody like my Grandma Worley. Now, Grandma Worley was somebody that got a TV way, way later on, after everybody else in the community had gotten one. And she finally got her a TV, and she got one station, and it was super snowy. And her 2 favorite programs were The Price is Right, and the other program that she loved was wrestling. And oh, she would get into that wrestling, and she would just scream at the TV. And she had her a little Greer applesauce can that she'd spit in. And the more she'd watch that wrestling, the more she would spit. And all of a sudden, if somebody got hurt, oh, she'd get real, real quiet. And she'd just look and just get real solemn. And it would never fail that Sunday, if a wrestler got hurt during the week, that she'd ask prayer for him at church. That's how much she got into it. Or somebody like Granny Et. Granny Et was the strongest person I knew. Granny Et was a snake dealer. Now, you may not know what that is, but snake dealer is someone who goes out and they catch copperheads and rattlesnakes and they sell them to snake handling churches. And she would do that on the side for extra money. So she was a pretty strong woman. Now, she would hitchhike everywhere. That's how just bold she was. And she told me when she was a little girl, she never had a baby doll, but she always wanted a baby doll so bad. She said, oh, honey, why, Mommy would make us those corn shuck dolls, where they'd take the shucks out of corn and just flip it around and just take the silk and wind around it and make pretty little dolls. But, oh, I'd go down to Marshall and I'd see those pretty dolls in the window, and I wanted one so bad. Well, when she got old enough to have kids, and they got old enough to have kids, and they got old enough to have kids, meaning she had great-grandchildren, we all started buying her baby dolls for Christmas. Now, she lived in this little cabin, and there was one bulb that came down from the ceiling, and it was really, really dim. And that one-room cabin, she had nailed those baby dolls to the walls of the cabin. And as a kid, they were all looking down at me. And she would sit in her rocking chair with the most wrinkled face and long, stringy hair. And she would just look at those baby dolls and go, scared me to death. So it wasn't a surprise when she escaped from the nursing home on the day that they put her in there. She convinced someone that her son had took her there to visit her sister, and they just gave her a ride to Marshall, which is about a mile away. Well, the second time she escaped from the nursing home, she hitchhiked from Marshall, North Carolina, all the way to Newport, Tennessee, which is about an hour-and-a-half trip by car. And the only reason they caught her was because my great-uncle, her son, was selling tobacco in Newport, Tennessee. And he was driving along, and he said, Lord, there's Mama. And he picked her up and took her back. She had a pistol with a huge, long snout on it, and she had $800 in her right pocket inside of her coat. She was a strong woman. Now, she also said that when she was a little girl, that down in Marshall, the riverboat captains would come and they would drive barges from Asheville into Marshall. And the boatmen would sing songs as they were rowing the boats into Marshall to unload all their cargo. And so I want to teach you a song that's famous in that little community where she grew up. And this community is over in the Laurel section of Madison County. This is a place where you couldn't throw a rock without hitting a banjo picker. So that's how many banjo pickers there were. So I'd love to do this song, and I want to get you all to help me with it if you could. And if you're sitting at home, you can sing right along with me too, or maybe you're in your car listening on the radio, or maybe you're on your rubbing phone. That's what in Madison County, there's this old woman, she come up to me and she says, all my grandyoung's got them rubbing phones. They just rub on them all day long. She said, I'm going to get me one of them. So even if you're on your rubbing phone listening to the Appleseed, you can sing this song with me. And it's one of the songs that the boatmen used to sing. It's called The Boatman. Well, the boatman dance and the boatman sing, and the boatman does most any old thing. When the boatman comes to shore, he'll play for pennies and dance for more. Dance, oh dance, boatman dance, dance all night to the broad daylight. Go home with the girls in the morning. Hi-ho, the boatman roll, float down the river called the Ohio. Now in this song, it's real simple. All you have to do is do just like the boatman in Marshall. You just yell hi-ho. Are you ready? 1, 2, here we go. Hi-ho, the boatman roll, float down the river called the Ohio. That's it. You may even feel like dancing if you're home. Now the boatman, he's a thrifty man. He'll take anything that he well can. Never seen a pretty girl in my life. What wouldn't married and a boatman's wife dance? Oh, dance, boatman, dance. Said dance all night to the broad daylight. Go home with the girls in the morning. Here we go. Hi-ho, the boatman roll, float down the river called the Ohio. Well, when the boatman blows his horn, you better watch out or your daughter's gone. He took my sheep and he took my goat. He put them in a sack, then he put them on the boat. Dance, pretty mean. Dance, boatman, dance. Dance all night to the broad daylight. Go home with the girls in the morning. Here we go. Hi-ho, the boatman roll, float down the river called the Ohio. One more time. Hi-ho, the boatman roll, float down the river called the Ohio.
Thanks for joining us for a little story from the Appleseed.